Last but not least, in our primary season interviews, we're focused on House District 32. Mark Lightner in with us. Mark, how are you, man? Good to see you.
I'm doing wonderful. I appreciate you having me.
Glad to have you along. For folks who don't know you, don't remember you from the first time you ran for office, who's Mark Lightner and what got him into this?
Yes, sir. So Mark Lightner, born and raised in Brevard County. I graduated from Beer High School, then went to the University of North Florida and moved back here after I met my beautiful wife, and we've been married for almost 5 years now. And we have 2 children. Just found out the news that number 3 is on the way.
Congratulations, that's cool.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome. God is good, and they're really the reason why I'm getting involved. I had my first kid 2.5 years ago. I'll let you do the math on how quickly we're at number 3 already.
Yeah.
but yeah.
So you're telling me you're a guy, when you have a mission, you get it done. I get it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I had my first kid, and I started to think a lot about the future. You know, I started to think a lot about Florida's future and kind of the direction that it's being taken, and I think that the younger generation of conservatives have to start stepping up. We have to start getting involved because it's ultimately our future that's being decided right now in our government.
Yeah, that's very true. You know, you made a run previously. You, in your initial foray into politics, you ran against a very established Debbie Mayfield in a Senate primary, and you came up with 16% of the vote. That's huge for a guy who's never been in the game before against an established candidate. Did that give you the confidence to try this Florida House race?
It did, and it gave me, it was a 6-week crash course being outspent 50 to 1, and
right.
kind of learning, what it takes. And this time around, I've had almost 6 months and a lot more money than I had last time around, and I really think this time I have a serious shot at winning this thing.
What did you learn from that first campaign that you've applied in this one that gives you that confidence?
One, to beat somebody with 6 weeks time is almost impossible. So this time around, just the time. You need time to campaign. You need time to really go out and meet people. This time around, I've had the chance to knock almost 8,000 doors myself, and I just wasn't able to do that last time. So it's time is the biggest advantage. Very,
very good. Let's get you out of the campaign mode and into what the job does and what's in play. The legislature has put in front of us a property tax abatement, well, not an abatement, but the
reduction.
The reduction in the homestead exemption. Yeah. I'll get there eventually. Sorry about that. But as you get into that, how do you feel about that? Good move. It's going to put some pressure on counties and cities. They're whining and screaming already. And our county's already said we're raising the property taxes by 10%, maximum we can do without a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
So it's changing how things are done. Give me your views on that.
So I love the idea of putting pressure on our local governments to reduce spending. And we've seen that in the past 10 years, a lot of these governments have doubled their budget when their population has not doubled. So I think that's a great idea to reduce property taxes, one, to save people money, but 2, to hold government accountable and make sure they're budgeting and budgeting well. And my one concern is that I don't want to see the cost burden shifted elsewhere. So that's my only concern with this, but I will definitely be voting yes on it.
Okay. Well, my perception of that is that cities and counties haven't been properly budgeted money anyway, and included in this referendum is a definition of core functions that they must fund first. My perception is if they'd have been doing that all along, this may not have been necessary.
Absolutely. So it's infrastructure, public education, and public safety, and if it falls outside of those 3 buckets, I really think that the government is wasting our money.
Let me ask you what you think the most important thing is that you could do if you got elected to this job.
So ultimately, I think that our government is very short-sighted, that they're really focused on the next year or 2, and in doing that, you're hindering the next 40 years, which I'm looking at the next 40 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And example after example of them being short-sighted, I think in the long term is really going to hurt us and hurt our state. So a great example, in my opinion, is the flock cameras. So short term, we see the benefits, right? We see that they're catching criminals, and yeah, that's great. But every day, dozens of those things are going up in our state. And I think if we really play that situation out, that in 20 years we look like China. And what happens if our Republican supermajority government is no longer in place. And we have cameras on every block. I mean, I really don't want to become the surveillance state of China.
I believe that would be best handled by stiff law on anyone who abuses that system. And we've seen it put into play in some places across the state where folks have abused it, and they've been fired from police departments, they're facing criminal prosecution. If we have stiff laws about misuse of information that's gathered in a public place where you can't expect to be private,
No.
that if anybody who abuses that information needs to be punished severely. What do you think?
I think there's definitely two sides to that. So, and I'm always on the side of erring on the side of, safety. But if that safety, anytime the government does something in the name of, I want to keep my citizens more safe, we should always question that, be very wary of that, and,
Ends up being
and
restricted.
definitely have guardrails on that.
Okay, very good. Something that Representative Monique Miller has put up in front of the legislature in the last session, it will come back in the next one, and probably until it passes, is the idea of those small modular nuclear devices. I think for the power grid, I think for things like data centers that may be coming, or other power needs, that's going to be essential for Florida. What do you see in those?
I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think that ultimately the state doesn't really produce its own power, and it's something that we should be looking into. We need to be self-sustaining as a state and not rely on other country or sometimes other countries for power, but other states as well.
Speaking of data centers and AI, the internet, I grew up in an era where that was not available to me. My kids grew up and phones suddenly became available. I was pretty restrictive about when they could have them. And all of a sudden now, every kid is walking around connected to the world with a device in their hand. You're a dad of young kids. The legislature has tried to regulate some of this internet and access type things. AI is going to be a part of the conversation too. Give me your thoughts on technology and the state's role versus maybe the federal role in regulation in those.
So I think that we see the state, they're a lot more proactive and quicker to react to some of these issues than our federal government. As we see right now, we have a gridlock federal government. They're not really passing anything that's actually effective, even though we want them to pass certain things.
Right.
So I think that the state, if our federal government is being as gridlocked as they are today, that they should step in and police guardrails and certain things like AI and data centers. But ultimately, I think, specifically when it comes to phones and kids and that kind of thing, it comes down to parenting, and at the end of the day, we see parents do other things that maybe we don't agree with, and other parents see stuff that we're doing that, they don't agree with. But the government can't be our parent, can't be the kids' parents. So ultimately it comes down to good parenting.
Does bring up a First Amendment issue, and if parents want their kids to have access to certain content, who's the state to say no?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think that there still is a role to put guardrails in place. And I was in first grade when I was exposed to pornography. No first grader, that's a 5 or 6 year old, should be exposed to that type of content.
Right.
There should be guardrails for that kind of content.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Infrastructure is a big issue statewide with this tax referendum in play. Do you see room, as you look at the state budget, for the state to be more involved in helping these local communities with infrastructure issues? The state claims to have a surplus, but who knows how long that's going to last?
I don't think it'll be lasting long on the surplus, and I think any time that you're looking for the state to step in on local issues, that it's kind of an area where you're going to have political games played, scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of thing. Where ultimately, if we're having a surplus so much, then I think that then they're taking in too much money, and that the local government should be having that money to better discern and spend on their local issues rather than the state stepping in. I just think that it starts to get a little imbalance when you start playing those kind of games.
If you go to Tallahassee, you're going to have an opportunity to serve on various committees. What's your wheelhouse? What do you want to work on as a legislator?
So I really want to focus on the future of Florida. So I think a big one is education. That I have a unique perspective. I went through the education system, and I think that there's a lot of areas that we need to improve. We need to stop the focus on college. College is, it's great for many people, but it's not the path. I really wish that I was exposed at a younger age to what it looks like to be a carpenter, what it looks like to be an electrician. I potentially could have enjoyed that more than the business realm that I'm in now. So I think the key is really focusing on giving our kids a proper education. And I think that's an area that we could definitely improve on.
Very, very good. Our time's about up. For folks who don't know Mark Lightner, want to know more about you, your family, and your hopes for this job, where do they go to find it?
So you can go to votelightner.com, and you can also reach out to me at 321-338-0019.
Okay, spell Lightner for everybody.
Lightner.
Very good. Mark Lightner, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, sir.